Just a little bit about the ISB for those of you who don't know the ISB. It's a large benchmark survey. The reporting is in person and confidential for each institution. So if you take part, it's not that we're going to say, oh, this institution does way better or less good than this institution. It's really to help the institutions themselves improve and understand what their students think about it. In total, we had over 120 international students and close to 70,000 domestic students. Some institutions run both the ISB and the SB. Altogether, 146 institutions were in the benchmark from 17 countries. 8,100 students took part from 17 institutions. And if we look at the survey response, there's a big variance between the German institutions, from 40% that people took part to 10%, and that gives an overall average score of 16%. Every dot that you see here represents an institution. If we look at the global average response rate, it's 22, same as the European response rate. So this gives you what's the actual response rate, what's the population. So that helps you to understand a little bit. But pay attention to this one. So between 40 and 10% is where the institutions in Germany go. Anything that is below the 10%, so institutions that are in this area where it's below 10%, and if they have less than 100 students participating, we take them out of the benchmark. So they will get their own results, but they're not included in the benchmark. If we look at the nationality breakdown, we've only given the top 5 nationalities. For Germany, they are India, followed at length by China, Turkey, Iran, and Italy. And you see the global benchmark below. If we look at the nationality breakdown, EU versus non-EU, most of the international students in Germany are non-EU. India, China, Turkey, Iran, and the Russian Federation are the top 5. When we say other, it doesn't mean that we don't know them, but we just give the top 5 here. In the open comments for the institutions, when you're not able to identify an individual, we will give the nationality, but we do that with care. If we look at the study level breakdown, so where are they in, what study level are they studying? The dark blue is the master students, nearly 60%, nearly 30% bachelor students, 9% PhD, and then some people that are in short courses. And this is the comparison in the global ISB. If we look at study stage breakdown, so where are they in their studies, we look at the dark one are the first and single year students, other year, the last year, and short course. And I'm showing you this to make you understand that it's possible to dive way deeper in the data. So participating institutions, I've seen a few of you participants, and you can really dive deeper in the data, as you probably all know. You can look at, for instance, an Italian bachelor student versus an Iranian bachelor student, and what do they appreciate in the learning, and how can you cater for different groups. So you can dive way deeper in the data. If we take the management survey, what are the main points to notice for Germany? Well, for sure, Germany is a popular study destination, high quality education, and you have a clear pathway to careers. And this is an interesting one because, well, as you know, for instance, my home country, the Netherlands, that clear pathway to careers is not longer that obvious. In Germany, the German government allows you to have that clear pathway to careers, and it's a very keen one for this current generation of students. If we look at the arrival satisfaction, it has improved considerably in comparison with 2018, but also in comparison overall. If we look at the previous ISB that we've done in Germany, we've done it for several times Germany-wide. So that's interesting to notice that the arrival satisfaction has improved. There's still room for improvement. I'll show you later on. Now, the international students we surveyed in Germany are satisfied with standards in learning, so that's important. And in the learning part, There's room for improvement if we look at making friends from this country and good contacts for the future. The student services, yeah, there's definitely room for improvement. Accommodation offers, studerendenwerk, that are things where things can be done better if we compare it both internationally but also European-wide. And the career services is definitely something that can be improved. It has improved with many institutions, but there's still clear areas for improvement there. What I think is the most important for the current generation and the future generation of students is employability, because that's key for them. They want to see a clear line of sight. If I study this study, how is it going to help me in the future? They want to see return on investment, and that is something that previous generations were less clear about. So making that connection to the world of work is an important one for an institution. This slide is an important slide. I do apologize that if you're quick in counting, you'll think, well, it doesn't add up to 100. That is simply because of the rounding of the figure. So yes, we can count to 100, but sometimes the rounding of the figures makes it look a bit strange. What's the most important takeaway from a slide like this? It's a big question. At the end of the slide, you see the question, overall, how satisfied are you with all aspects of your experience at this institution? That is a rather big question. And 86% of the students is satisfied. That is a good takeaway to notice. Of course, you can always focus on the area where you're doing less good, but here I would really go for the large green part. That propensity to recommend, the likelihood that somebody is going to recommend your institution or your country is an important one when you think about how to market the institution that you present for the future. What you see on this slide is the German data, the difference between 2022 and the previous one where we did it with support from Gate Germany. The ones that are most important are the top and the lower bar, because that's where people actually do something. Then you see the global comparison, the European comparison, master, bachelor and PhD level comparisons for Germany. The numbers that you see here between brackets are the actual number of people that have answered the question. Not every question is obligatory to make sure that people continue in doing the questionnaire. So when there's a reason for it, then we give you the exact number of people that have answered the question. What we see here is that over time, 4% less people would recommend the German institution that they attended to a family member or a friend. That is an interesting one to notice. If you also look at it over time, the group green is over time the largest group, and you can see how often we've done the ISB with support of Gate Germany or with a large group of German institutions, sometimes without support from Gate Germany. So we've given those comparisons here. But you do see that this particular DISC group is getting bigger again, and this is the only 5-point scale that we have in the survey, and you see that people would neither encourage or discourage people. That group is growing again over time, where it was getting lesser, it's growing again now. If we look at value for money, to what extent do you feel that your current course is good value for money? You could, of course, argue there's no tuition fees in Germany, so that's why you score well as Germany as a whole. I think the question, to what extent do you feel that your current course is good value for money, encompasses more than just do I pay tuition fees or not. I think that 38% strongly agrees here and 49% agrees, gives you a very strong foothold that students feel that they get a good education. Yes, sometimes without paying tuition fees, which is great, but it's a whole package that is making the 38% compared to 25 and 33% in respectively globally or Europe-wide. So that's an important one to notice. If we look at choice for destination, so how do they decide to come to your institution. We only ask this question, by the way, to students that have recently arrived, so first year students. It doesn't make sense to ask a final year PhD student, how was your arrival decision? So we only ask that to the ones that have recently come to Germany and to your institutions. What's most important? Future career impact. As I mentioned already, that employability part is a really key one, but it's also internationally the most important one. The hyphen, the pink hyphen that you see here is the global benchmark. The bar represents the German benchmark. Future career impact, specific course title, research quality, but also cost of living and cost of study play a role within Germany. I've put something here which I think is an important one to notice for the future. Environmental issues are getting more common as a decision-making factor. 68% of international students in Germany mentioned it, against 77% globally. We've seen over time it's getting more important, the whole environmental and sustainability part, and we've seen the rise starting in Australia and spreading across the world. So that's an interesting one to notice. What has helped them make their choice? So what were the influencers in making that choice for the institution? Well, clearly the institution website is more important in Germany, even 10% more important than it is elsewhere. Why have I put a bar around alumni? Because if your students leave your institution and leave your country, or stay in your country, but leave the institution really feeling prepared for the next step in their career, then I think you have created brand ambassador alumni. I think alumni are an underused source sometimes in telling the story about their education at that particular institution in a particular country. They've seen all the good things, but also all the bad things. So I think that's really the group of people that can tell the story as it is. What is least mentioned is the host government advisory service at only 10% and not made it to the top 10 that we see here. But it's important to realize that Germany's brand strength is a very large and important value to take into account. 83% said that Germany was their first choice of study. Important one to notice. But we've also asked, and we have that for every institution individually also, what's the most important in your decision? Is it the institution, the dark part, or is it the country? And you can see, if we take all the German institutions together that took part in this ISB, that the institution is less important than the country. 54% mentions the country as most important compared to 39% globally. So Germany has strong brand strengths. A little bit as a summary of what we've just said about the decision making, the top 3 for study choices, future career impact, specific course title, and research quality. Germany is really the first choice as a study location, and if we compare 2018 and 2022, it's gone up a little bit, and certainly if we compare globally, as you can see here, 4% difference globally. What is an important one to realize? Future career is the principal driver for study experience in Germany. And my tip would be integrate employability skills into curricula to support your international students in navigating a constantly changing world of work. I think we all understood that during the pandemic, things were shifting and changing. I think we're in a state of sort of perma-change. We're constantly changing. And I think we need to prepare our students for that kind of world of work. Yes, I mentioned country is more important than the institution, and it's really a lot more important if you compare Germany versus the global ISB. If we look at the arrival part, again, a big question being asked, overall, how satisfied are you with the arrival experience? And as I said, that's only the first year students. You're doing well as Germany there on par with the global ISB. I mentioned the pandemic already, and during the pandemic we did the ISB with a smaller number of institutions, but we did run the ISB, but we changed a few things. And one of the things we changed based on that pandemic ISB is understanding how academically prepared students are in starting their studies. This was the first year where we've asked it. I'm now looking at data for the second year because we felt that it started already before the pandemic, but it's for sure accelerated due to the pandemic, that students might get at your institutions less well prepared. Now the debate can be whose responsibility is that, but it's important to realize that you have 24% of students who say they're not well prepared for starting their studies. Orientation program that used to be always, of course, face-to-face. In Germany, it's still the majority of students that attends face-to-face. 10% more in Germany than if you compare globally. But there's also a large group that doesn't attend the formal orientation, whether it's face-to-face or online. And we've looked a little bit deeper at that group and asked them, why did you not participate? I didn't know about that. Now, I highly doubt that there's any German institution that doesn't tell their international students when the orientation program takes place or how it takes place. But it just tells us we need to talk to our students, communicate in one way, use email, use social media posts, use different ways of communicating and making sure that we reach our students, because messages don't always get through. This slide looks like a lot of information, but I'm going to talk you through. Arrival average is really calculating the average of all the questions in the arrival field. Arriving overall is that one single question that I've been showing you. What you see here are the keywords coming from the question. So the question is not first night, but the question is how easy was it to get to your accommodation that first night of arrival, the night you arrived. What you see here is the German data, the global ISB comparison, then the difference there. This helps you to understand straight away what that difference is. The European ISB comparison, and then the difference there, helping you understand both in numbers and graphically how to compare. This is not a very nice slide to look at because there's quite a lot of red. What works well in a European comparison is the face-to-face orientation, the virtual onboarding, but most other things don't work that well. Getting to that first night of accommodation is almost 14% below the global benchmark. Information around accommodation and your living orientation, quite key for arriving students, is way below both the global comparison, but it's an area that not all European institutions are good at either. Host friends, that's a tricky one. That's connecting with the German students upon arrival. Interestingly enough, that's also an area where a lot of the other European institutions are not that good. If we look at derived importance, for me, the derived importance slides are very handy to use it and to use where to make investments, either in money or in time from the staff that work for the institutions. If you look at the derived important, it tells you the correlation between how important is that particular element for recommending the institution and how satisfied are they. So what matters most to your students is arrival overall, but also the social facilities and the social orientation. The whole first night is less important in that comparison. Social activities and social orientation, if you only have a limited budget and a limited resource at your availability, focus on these two because that's where the biggest steps can be made. If we look at year-on-year satisfaction, well, I think it's obvious there's a lot that has gone better, But I think the next focus for improvement has to be that social part. That's definitely, I'm trying to find my cursor here, that's definitely where there's room for improvement. The report that was referred to by Dr. Callahan about the ISB data has some very interesting case studies in there. I've put some links here. Jena and Hochschule Fulda are really good case studies, good examples to understand what you can do in the arrival satisfaction. So have a look at those interviews because I think they're absolutely great. What are some of the highlights that I want to share with you? Well, the factors that contribute most to the institutions, recommendation, overall arrival experience, social activities, virtual onboarding, social orientation, and the introduction to the local area. Pay attention because it's the international students that find it really difficult to make friends with the German students. How can you improve on that? Work on your German students. Your international students are already out of their comfort zone. It's the German students that require attention. There's room for improvement, as I said. For instance, welcome at the pickup, at the airport, train or bus station. That is definitely something where there's room for improvement. But yeah, you can also have a discussion. How much do we want to spoon feed our international students? So happy to have a discussion about that later on. If we look at the learning experience, the key part of any study abroad experience, 68% from the international student surveyed in Germany says they're satisfied, 21% says very satisfied, again 66 saying satisfied in the global ISB. If we dive into the teaching or in the whole benchmark part, we've divided it up into 3 parts. So let's start with the teaching part. As I mentioned again, this is that one single question, the learning overall, and then the learning average is simply calculating the average. What stands out? The expertise of your lecturers, 94%. It's a very competitive area. Every institution wants to have expert lecturers, wants the expertise of their lecturers to be above the others. But 94 is very high number, so pay attention there. Performance feedback is the one thing that I took out here, also because there's a difference between global and European benchmark, but I think it's important to realize that you do well in Germany and that is something that has improved over time. So that's a nice one to notice for those of you who've done the ISB a couple of times. Where's room for improvement? Employability, the question is, will this program offer me good opportunities for the future? And the careers advice that we look at here is not the career center, but is careers advice coming from academics. Here I would focus tremendously if I was an institution in Germany. I would make my staff really understand that, and this might be a breach from the humble tradition, but that we educate people for a job market, also for an academic job market, but for a job market, for a career after their graduation. So make sure that as an academic, as a professor, that you bring in alumni, maybe bring in things that help people understand what they can do with the actual learning. If we look at facilities, on-campus facilities access is the only one where you outperform, but the rest, there's some room for improvement here. What's the derived importance? So where's the correlation between a particular element in the learning area and the satisfaction? So what has the most impact if you make improvements there? The learning overall, the quality of the lectures, and again, employability popping up. So quality of lectures, yes, that would be a no-brainer. I think that's where you have to focus on always. But learning that will help me get a good job is an important one, as is careers advice. Oh, that cursor. Careers advice coming from academics being an important one. Course organization is literally knowing my way around the institution, knowing when I have to be where. If we look at it over time, lots have improved. Learning overall, quality of lectures, physical library access, studying with people from other cultures declined over time. Opportunities for work experience. Now I know this is not an area where most German institutions are keen to have students working outside of their studies, but it does provide them a connection to the world of work. If we look at the online learning experience, this is coming from the pandemic, where we asked a lot of questions here, but we've kept asking those questions to see what's to gauge a little bit the satisfaction on all these various parts: online assignment, online lectures, how well are you doing there in an international comparison, and why? Because we've asked students, based on your current online study experience, would you choose to study online again in the future? 60% of the international students that answered this question said yes, compared to 45% globally. So there's a large group that still likes to get some part of their education, very often large hearing assignments. That's where they like to have online support. What are some of the lessons from the ISB here? Employability is definitely the key element. And most international students are pleased with the level of education. Tutors are considered knowledgeable and engaging, but still advice and guidance on long-term job opportunities and careers advice coming from academic staff, as is the full question, that is 13% below the global benchmark and just 1% below the European benchmark. So that's definitely an area for improvement, and so is the learning that will help me to get a good job. It's not that you're doing terribly bad in a European comparison, but if we compare it internationally, there's room for importance. And I think it's also essential to acknowledge that culture plays a role on how you can guide the different international groups of students. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution here. If we look at the living experience, 61% satisfied against 66 in a comparison globally. So that's an interesting area to look. Living is again split up in 3 areas. And accommodation and living costs, I think sometimes German universities get a bit almost worn down on this one. Yeah, we know living cost is lower than elsewhere. And yeah, cost of accommodation is lower than elsewhere. Now you could treat that as almost a negative, but you could also think like, well, you've got a very high quality education and it's not expensive to live here. 19% lower in a European comparison. That is a very useful point to use in your marketing towards international students. And that's not about only the cost of education or the cost of accommodation, it's also the actual living cost. Whereas room for improvement is around the social aspect, as I mentioned already. Social activities, making good contacts for the future and making friends for this country. It was mentioned in the arrival process. It's mentioned again when they're at your institutions for a longer time. Connecting with the German students. Feeling safe and secure. It is slightly below the global and the European benchmark, but with 95%, I think most people still feel pretty safe and secure on campus. When your institution is way below this, that's an interesting one to have a look at. Did anything happen? Was there something that would explain why it's below the benchmark? But that's for the individual institutions. For Germany as a whole, it's a positive one. If we look at that derived importance for the living part, so what's the correlation between recommending the institution and the satisfaction, making good contacts for the future, and those social activities again, and making friends for this country pops up here as well. I mentioned already eco-friendly attitude being important for deciding to go to an institution, but it's definitely climbed in importance when we look at the whole recommendation part. So both for deciding to come to you as well as for recommending, this whole sustainability area is an area that I don't think we should neglect any longer. If we look at living satisfaction year on year, I really think your focus should be on the social aspects and bringing in the domestic students because they're key. The case study with Bayreuth is a real good example there. What you can do to make sure that from the start, maybe before they come to your institution, what you can do to create a better connection between internationals and domestic students. If we look at accommodation cost, and I already said it's 19% difference, but this one gives you a very clear indication. It is something I can't show to institutions in the Netherlands because I think they will start crying when they see that nearly 60% of students pay less than 400 euro a month. In my home country, the Netherlands, 800 is really cheap already. It starts a little bit from 800, 900, 1200. That category is where students are. That is hardly existent for the German institutions. So you have something really positive to market here. If we look at well-being, an area that has gotten more important over time, and I think you all realize if you talk to young people, if I talk to my 25-year-old daughter, the word mental health appears a couple of times. In my generation, it was not even really a thing. Mental health was not something that we would refer to. For this generation, it's a key one. So understanding student well-being is an important one. 88% of your students, if we look at all the international students that we surveyed for the 17 German institutions, are happy with their life at the institution. And we really asked them, how happy are you? But we do know that making friends, making good contacts, social activities, making friends from other countries, making friends from Germany, making friends from my home country, and feeling safe and secure are all areas that play a role. If we look at all of them, this is the German, the pink line is the German benchmark, and well, you can see the difference there. It's definitely something where there is some room for improvement. Are there any concerns about completing your studies? That is something that we've started asking during the pandemic and we've kept asking for a while. Not at all, says 26%. Against globally 30% and 34% in Europe. Slightly concerned, somewhat concerned, but the people that say very concerned, I've told all the institutions during their feedback, look at this number, because the group that says that they're very concerned, that's the area, that's the people that you have to pay attention to. And you can look at that area, you can see if it's a particular group, nationality-wise, is it bachelor, is it the master student, so you can look more in depth. And I mentioned the importance of mental health, so we've looked at how important is mental health for students and how easy do they find their access here. 21% very comfortable in asking advice, 42% comfortable, somewhat comfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, and very uncomfortable. Well, you can see the comparison yourself. So what are some of the lessons? It's a very positive perception overall, high quality education, safe environment, low living cost. But I do think there's room for improvement, particularly for the social aspect. So I would focus on the social aspect. And in doing that, my key area, my key focus would be the German students. They are the key in making this happen. If we look at the support experience, overall satisfaction high, but there's also some comparison here where you can see that not everybody is happy with the support services offered. Let's look at that. This question of this slide is a little bit different because we've shown here support usage. And yes, the green one, they've used it. They light green, aware, but haven't used it. But I think the yellow one, orangey one is the most important one. It may be relevant, but I'm unsure how to access it. That is really the key one to focus on. Because if you have a careers center, if you provide career support, but 36% of your students is not aware that they can access it too, that's a shame. What's going well if we look at this benchmark slide? The international office, both at faculty level and centrally, is doing really well. Whereas room for improvement, the careers advisory service and the accommodation office, that would be the ones that I would take from this slide. If we look at the derived importance, so how important is it for recommending a particular institution? Faith provision is an important one. Disability support, although not everybody needs it, people find it's important that it's in place. And careers advisory support. So having that careers office is a key one. Now, I already mentioned it. This slide shows you the usage, and that hyphen that you see here is the usage of it. 15% use it. So yes, people are happy with it. 84% is happy, but only 15% have actually used it. That is way too low. So I think having a support service is just a start. Marketing it to your students, making sure that they're aware of it, is really an important one. And here I would like to refer you to the case study of HS Osnabrück, Hochschule Osnabrück, because that can help you understand what you can do in that area for support services. If we look at careers and future plans, bearing in mind that employability is important. If we look at the expectations that people have, they expect, and the hyphen here is the global benchmark again, they expect advice. How do I write a Lebenslauf in Germany? What do I put on there? There's also a large group that expects placement. If you don't deliver placement, if you don't help them get a good job, make sure you manage their expectations and make sure that you tell them that you don't do that. If we look at the satisfaction, so the other one was the expectation that people have, this is the satisfaction. If it's around the information, so how do I write that CV, the Lebenslauf, what do I put in a letter? What does a German employer expect from me during a job interview? And how important is being on time, for instance? Well, yeah, they need more information. They need more help here. That's not going really well, certainly not if we compare it globally, but that applies for all the things. So there's work to do here for the German institutions, but the interesting thing is, in the end, students are prepared for their career goals. 19% says very prepared, against 22 globally. 58% against 49% globally says prepared. But I think the improvement is in providing 24/7 careers information and understanding how job hunting works in Germany, because you might think that it's completely self-explanatory and you just give them an example of a Lebenslauf and says, yeah, it's important that it's chronologically order or reverse chronological and that you provide every detail that you've done. They need more understanding before they can be successful in job hunting. So what are the lessons from the support service? Well, it's definitely an area that needs improvement. Intensify, I know Studentenwerke, it's a different story in Germany than it's elsewhere, but intensify the cooperation there, make sure that it's really working out. And what might be, if you look at the open comments, a thing to bear in mind is the language that you use. The word no, nein in German, is completely acceptable in your language, in my language, but for international students it might be a word that doesn't go down well. So it might be also the way you communicate to the international students. And for sure the career services is something that should get attention. Some conclusions. Well, what makes students recommend their German experience? I think it's definitely good value for money. Low cost of living, good student accommodation, low or zero tuition fees. But I think the link to the world of work is definitely essential. That is what's gonna help you remain top tier. Guidance and support to bridge the gap between academic learning and the professional field is a key one, and providing actual understanding of job hunting in different countries. My top 5 recommendations, I always find that a difficult one to give, but I was asked to do it, so here we go. Employability, the link to a constantly changing world of work. Careers advice, bring in your alumni and make lecturers aware of the importance of the work field. Career support, so that's a different one from careers advice. Careers advice is your academics, your lecturers, your professors. Career support is the actual support. And there I would like to refer you to Career Professor, because it's a useful tool to provide that 24/7 basic careers advice, not just for one country, but for over 40 countries. I mentioned the importance of sustainability. There's a new initiative, not from iGraduate, although I'm involved in it sideways, but it's called the Climate Action Barometer, worth looking at, and I would say connecting to Germans. There is an app from a very young company called Going, without a G, and it helps to integrate your students upfront already with the German students. So I think that is a nice one to look at as well. What's the winning formula? I think programs that help students to not get a job after graduation, but to really start their career, because for me, employability is definitely more than just a job after graduation. It's being prepared for the world of work and opportunities to make friends with local students. Yeah, that's it. I hope it was a good session and that you had useful takeaways from it.